everyone. Welcome to another episode of Taking Up Space, a Michelle Mayer podcast. Always excited about coming forward. Always excited about coming forward with a thought-provoking conversation for you guys. And today I have another one. This will be biblically based, okay? This won't be based on, it will be based off some world events, but I'm going to support my content with biblical scripture, okay? So I've been looking around, y'all, on social media. I've been looking in the news, and I cannot help but to notice what has most recently happened with the young woman that passed tragically by her boyfriend setting her on fire. Child, I woke up this morning with it on my mind. I thought of her this morning, and I thought, wow, how tragic is that, right? Like, she just won a medal on a national platform. Like, she's a Kenyan woman from her community, exalted to the level that she exalted to. One of the highest medals that you can win in a competition. I mean, I believe that the Olympics is the highest medal you can win, right? In a competition, outside of like working, being in a professional league and then competing against someone else. And for her to go back home to her community, to her country, and be burnt, to get gasoline thrown on her, and for her to be burnt alive by her boyfriend, and come to find out it was over a dispute for property. I just couldn't, it just didn't sit well with me. And you guys, I've been going through, I did a podcast with a dear friend of mine most recently, and I would post it, but I'm going to redo it because I believe we could do it better. You know what I mean? I respect you all too much. I respect your attention to just throw anything out there for you. So I'm going to redo that podcast. But the topic of our podcast that we had over the Labor Day weekend was men and women relationships and just the disrespect for women nowadays. I can't help but notice it. It is blatant, and I'm not a feminist. I'm not one of those people that, think that women should. I think we all should be able to offer up our gifts. But I'm not out here fighting to be, for you to respect me at, in trying to do what men do. I'm not knocking women that do that, nor am I in alignment with women that don't. I have nothing to say on that. I can just speak to my walk. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to do what men do. I love the fact that God blessed me with being a woman. It is the greatest gift I think I could have ever asked to be outside of my cultural heritage. I'm a very culturally grounded woman. I love my culture. And those two are non-negotiables with me. The fact that I am innately a woman, I am innately feminine, and the fact that I come from a very strong vine, a strong lineage that I'm extremely proud of. But, it's just the regard for women in general, y'all. Like, just, we were talking about relationships and how, men expect certain things in relationships, and if women don't play those roles without having any type of concrete agreement, then they're labeled being difficult, or they're labeled expecting too much, and so on and so forth. And then to hear that this happened to this woman just blew me away. And so I'm going to get into this. I want to go into history. I want to go back to the Bible, to where this started. I'm going to reference Genesis chapter 2 to set this off. We're going to go back to Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to go, I'm going to simplify it. I would love to hear your remarks in the comments. Please remark if you have anything that you'd like to add. And let's begin a conversation about this. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Now, prior to this verse, God sees that Adam needs a helpmate. He's alone in the garden. So God creates all these animals, and he still sees that there is no one found to be a help for Adam. These animals in the garden were no real help for Adam. Okay? So God forms the women, the woman. Okay, this is the biblical text. I could use the Apocrypha because the Apocrypha goes into greater detail as to this creation story. It gives more body and color and imagery to the words, because in the Bible, y'all, they only give you high notes. The Bible doesn't really go into detail until it really wants to. But I'm not going to even get into all that, okay? So we will go with the perception that Eve came from Adam's rib. Okay, so all of y'all out there that don't agree with that, and that, I'm not negating that, and I'm not agreeing with that, because if I read this same verse in the Apocrypha, I could see how you could feel that way. But I'm not even going to go into that because it will take too long. That will be another podcast conversation. In the Genesis conversation, it says, chapter 2, verse 24. Therefore shall a man leave, verse 24. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Okay, so the woman has already been created. God has commanded Adam that you will leave your father and your wife, and you will cleave to you will leave your father and your mother, and you will cleave to your wife, and you will become one flesh. Okay? God didn't give Eve any commandment as to what she needs to do for Adam. All it says in Genesis is that God created a helpmeet for Adam. And that helpmeet was Eve. Okay? Then it goes down and it says to Adam that he will leave his father and his mother, and he will cleave to his wife. I just read that. Did I read that to you? Yes, I just read that to you. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Then it goes further and it says, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. That tells me that they were naked in the garden. They were in balance, in harmony. They were not ashamed because they stood in the totality of this truth. They accepted it. They were not uneasy about it. There was no timidity about it. This is balance. Everybody knew their role. But what many people forget in this text, what I just read, because when it goes further, the next set of communications in the Bible is chapter 3, and it goes directly into the serpent. It says right after that, now the serpent was the most supple than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. Boom. Now we're dealing with Eve by herself. But I got to get into this, what God spoke to Adam. God gave Adam a commandment that he will leave his father and his mother, and he will cleave to his wife. Period. God didn't tell Eve anything. God has not commanded Eve to do anything. Okay? And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. That tells you they were both naked. They stood in the rawness of their essence. All of them, they showed themselves to each other. Each other could see into each other. They're in harmony. They're in agreement to all that was commanded of them. Then comes the serpent. Why did the serpent go to Eve? Why didn't the serpent go to Adam? Many people think, they went to Eve because she was a foolish woman. She doesn't know. So he went to her to trick her. No, the serpent went to Eve because Eve was the help of Adam. How are you going to help Adam if you are stuck on stupid? How are you going to be helpful to Adam if you are ignorant? What makes you a help is what makes you an asset. A help is an asset. She was a help because she was wiser than Adam. She knew things Adam didn't know. And Adam needed her to be able to be what God needed him to be. That's the purpose that God created her. He could not do it by himself. He needed her. So the serpent comes to her because why go to Adam? If he went to Adam first, the probability of it all working the way it did would have been less likely because Adam didn't have the power. Eve had the power. Eve was the mother of all living. She had the power. She's the vessel in which the Spirit of God will communicate his information to, and she is the vessel that Adam will use to procreate through. She's the vessel. So let's keep going. I'm not about to get into the serpent. Please refer to my Adam and Eve Bible study. I went into great detail in that Bible study, and I cross-referenced the Apocrypha. So there's no gray areas in that. And I've spoken tremendously to it since then. But I'm going to go further, and we will go over into chapter 3, verse 16. So now we're going to skip over into chapter 3, verse 16. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow in thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. So this solidifies what I said. Because in the creation story, the creation story, when God created Eve as a help for Adam, put them together, because if you read it in the Apocrypha, God created everybody. But was Eve alive prior to Adam? If you read it in the Apocrypha, it could be read in a way that she was. However, we won't even get into that because I don't want y'all to get mad at me, okay? This is a channel for you to think. If you're afraid and you get offended when you have to think, you probably need to go somewhere else. I'm just having to be honest with you. This is a channel where we are using the brain and all the faculties that God gave us to navigate our way through this thing and to find truth. So if you're afraid of that, if that offends you for whatever reason, you're going to have to find another channel. So it says here, when God, after Eve made the bad decision she made having to do with the serpent, decisions that Adam himself probably would have made. Adam probably would have made worse decisions. Eve did these things because she felt she was doing the right thing. All these people, the serpent, by way of the devil, all of these people were high-ranking people in the community within the garden. It wasn't as if she didn't know. It never says in the script that she did not know of the serpent. For the serpent to come upon her and to ask her something like that, she felt comfortable communicating with that serpent. She had seen that serpent before. He had rank. He had authority. This is a high-ranking official coming to a lesser-ranking official. Yet Eve had authority too. She had authority over Adam. This is why the serpent came to her. She was the door. When these entities come to anybody, they don't just go to anybody. They go to the heads. I just told you in the last Bible study I had yesterday of King Solomon getting the blessings of God to utilize the demonic realm. He built the Temple of Solomon and all sorts of other things with these demons, as did many others at that time. This was not a strange coincidence. It was normal. However, these entities, When King Solomon was using these entities, he wasn't going to the lower level demons that you find running around on the streets, standing on top of mountains and all corralled in groups in caves and stuff like that. He went to their commanders. This is exactly what the serpent has done with Eve. Eve was the head of the feminine lot on the garden. She just wasn't Adam's wife. She was a queen. She's the mother. You got to start thinking on these levels, because when you do it, a lot of this stuff comes to make sense to you. So he knew if he could trip her up, it would multiply down to everybody else. Why work your way up when you can just work your way down? It's easier to roll a boulder down a hill to get it where you need to be than it is to push one up. This is what's happening here. So now she's done the deed. She's realized she's sinned, and that her children and her husband and she will be cursed. God is giving his punishments out. One of which is her punishment. What is her punishment? This is the only time in the text that God actually speaks to Eve during this whole sequence of events. From the time that Adam was by himself in the garden, he created a helpmate, one of which is Eve. From the time that God commanded Adam what to do in his interactions with Eve, this is the first time that God has spoken to Eve during this whole sequence of events. And what does he say to her? He says, unto the woman, he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. That tells me that was not the way it was in the beginning. Because if it was, how could it be a curse? That was not what she was intended to do. But because of her error, her sin, now this is what she is bound to. And this is what we all wrestle with right now today. She is bound to desire her husband. And thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. She is bound to, her only desire is her husband. And he will rule over her. Prior to that, it wasn't like that. So, moving forward now to 2024, here we are. And look at the state of affairs we've been in. From all of this time up until now, women have had to go underground, friend. God never said in any of the text that women lost their power. God did not bind up the woman's power. God did not take away any aspect of herself. God didn't do anything. All God said was that your desire will be to your husband, and he will rule over you. Period. So when you look across the planet, I told you where all of these religions came forth from. They all came forth from what happened in Babylon. We all spoke one language at one time. Then it went to the speaking of many languages. But the truth was the truth, regardless to if you spoke it in this language or that language, because the experiences all are there. You're just telling the experiences in a different way with a different language. And of course, the stories change as time moves forward so that they could be understood throughout the generations. This is why it makes me wonder what people are thinking. I can tell people that think and people that don't think by what they talk about. We sit up here and say, oh yeah, you don't know what you're talking about because that same story is over here. And you don't know what you're saying because over here, those same people are named different. Yeah, they are. Because at one time, everybody spoke the same language. God changed it. Time went on. People told the story over and over and over again in different languages. Different things changed to fit certain new ways of life so that people could understand them. You don't sit up here. I remember watching Barack Obama in his debate. And he said, well, I'm just going off the top of my head, so don't quote me. But he was talking to somebody about speaking to an outdated topic. He was saying, I wouldn't say that I'm going to shoot you with a muzzle. Like, I'm not going to go get a muzzle and shoot you. Nobody would even understand what a muzzle was in today. It's the same way with spirituality, with the stories. They change over time, but the essence of them is there. So let's stay on track. So when you look at Eve, she's gone underground. Now she is subservient to her husband. Where she is the head, now she's the tail, if you want to look at it like that. She has to serve her husband in a way that is not in the natural order that she was created to do. There's resentment. Because now the order has changed. She's boggled with guilt. When you read the apocrypha of what Eve is saying in the story of Adam and Eve and all the other books, and the other book that I can't remember which one it was, she goes into detail as to how she feels. She's sorrowful. She's mournful. She blames herself that such a heavy curse has been put upon her, and not just her, all of her children. She's burdensome and mournful as to what Adam is going through. She blames herself. And in time, all of the women that come after her are blamed. The power is suppressed. This is where you get a lot of the coverings from. These are all feminine powers being suppressed. Don't show me your beauty. Cover your face. Cover your head. Cover everything. I don't want you to be able to use any of your feminine power, because all those aspects are powers of women. They are. Whether we want to agree to them or not, they are innately feminine. Period. You don't see women looking at men in the same way that men look at women. Women know how to take that energy and heighten it. This is her gift. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's what you use it for. And it takes me to where we are today as a state of people. I see so much disregard for women. But she still holds the power. She's still vitally necessary. Yet she has been disregarded. She's been broken down to an object of sex, an object to use to make life easy for you without you ever for a second committing anything to her. I was talking to my friend the other day on the podcast, and we were talking about men and relationships and how, a man will want to date you nowadays. He'll want to date you. Y'all go together. Y'all just dating and going together. And he will tell you up front, I just want us to be cool. I just want to be your friend. And, nobody has to know what you and I have. We have something special, but I don't like to be confined. And we done heard it all, ladies. We already know what it is. And if you want him bad enough, If you find him necessary enough to have in your life, you think in your mind that you could change that. You think in your mind, okay, I see his environment, I see everything that he's got going on, and I know that if I joined him in his walk in life, I could change him. I know I could wear all these hats that he has all these other women for. I could be that one woman that will replace all these other women. And you'll have these conversations with him. It ain't like you're not talking to him about it. You're gonna have a conversation with him about it, and you're gonna tell him the things that you like and you don't like, and of course he's going to use that. Some men will adhere to it and really will honestly commit. But then there are a lot of men that don't. And those that don't will have you locked in to a perpetual state of trying to adhere to pleasing him without him ever committing to you. And if you ever bring anything up to him about it, now you're complaining and you're demanding and, you're giving him an ultimatum and all this kind of stuff. It's the same thing that's going on with the feminine when Eve sinned with the serpent. All of this comes from that. Women innately are powerful. Innately. I don't care who she is. She's born with gifts of power. And these gifts of power are to help her man. When she comes into your life, her first thing she gonna do is learn you. She's going to learn you, whether you realize it or not. Whether she acts like she's learned you or she doesn't. Her job is to learn you. She's going to learn you. And she's going to size it up as to, is this something that's beneficial to me? And because of the fallen ones teaching her all this information, she knows how to oil herself up and put anklets on and different jewels and different types of clothing to entice you. All this stuff came from the fallen ones, y'all. This is the forbidden knowledge. She was running around the garden taking what was her daughters, the children, had gotten this knowledge, and they were running around the garden using this knowledge for gain of the creations. I don't know if they had a money system back there, but many people tell you prostitution is the oldest form of is the oldest business. All of this stuff came from the fallen ones. So all of this matters. But when I looked at the news and I saw this young woman got burnt up and that there was really no laws to protect her in her country, it immediately took me back to Adam and Eve and the fall. No regard for the feminine. Yet the woman is the kingmaker. She crowns the king. It is of her. You're not wise enough to ascend. You are not wise enough to navigate the spiritual waters without her. I'm here to tell you, she is vitally necessary. She could be your asset or she could be your opponent. God hears that woman's prayer, and that woman's prayer will make change in the world, and that's a fact. When you look at all of the previous kings, whether you look at the Egyptian dynasty or any other place on the planet, especially in Egypt, Egypt is Israel's mother. God had them children come out of Egypt for a purpose. God could have had them children come out of anywhere, friend. Jacob could have went anywhere. Jacob could have stayed in Canaan. God could have changed things and made it so that the Egyptians had to go to Jacob. Why did Jacob need to go to in Egypt? because Egypt had hold of something vitally necessary, very paramount, and that was the spiritual fundamental system. It was a birthing place of Israel. It gave Israel the ability to fundamentally become a nation of people spiritually. Why else would God have them go there? Why else would God have Jesus? Why would Mary and Joseph be led to Jesus? Why would they prophesy such things? Why would God give them a prophetic word of such things? Why would God have the children go back to Egypt before they went into slavery in Babylon? Egypt has always been a place of safety. Come get it. I'm ready for it. Egypt has always been a place of safety. Egypt is, if you look on the map, if you look across this whole planet, you'll see diversity across the whole planet. But baby, you look at the walls of Egypt, you know exactly who those people are. Those people in Egypt, the depictions of those people in Egypt is the only place really that an African American or African individual in general can look to for some form of strong identity multiplied. You can't go nowhere and not see it. It's everywhere. Why did they do that? Why did they take the time to do that? All these people that knew the end from the beginning. These folks knew the end from the beginning, friend. I'm not talking about all the nations, all the kings that had come that were corrupted. I'm talking about the people that were foundation builders of these places before the corruption. Because we can say every place has been corrupted, friend. You might be able to say Egypt got corrupted. It did. So did Israel. Everything has been corrupted. You saying Egypt got corrupted is not saying anything. So what? Didn't Israel get corrupted? Israel has stayed in a perpetual state of corruption, as like the Egyptians. It doesn't mean that they were initially like that. Because if they were, God would not have made them his chosen people. And if the Egyptians were the same, God would not have had the children nursed and to suck from the breast of Egypt for 400 years. Yet when you look at the walls of Egypt, you see everywhere of all the kings sitting on the laps of the mother. You look at Seti, my favorite picture, Seti sitting on the lap of Isis. He comes, how humbling is that? For a grown man, this is a king of the mightiest nation on the planet at the time. This is before the fall. For the king to come and sit on the lap of Isis. This is depicted, this lets you see, and this is the brilliance of the craftsman. See, the only way you would know these things is if you were to interpret this book properly. When you look at this and you read verbatim what the scripture says, it says that Adam's helpmate was Eve. She was the wiser. He had to go to her for help. She didn't go to him for help. It does not say that in the Bible. It says the total opposite. It says Eve was the help for Adam, meaning Adam had to go to Eve for help. When you look at the temples in Egypt, anywhere in there, You see all of those powerful kings, powerful, sitting on the lap of women. They've come to the women to get wisdom, to get blessings, because it is of the woman that crowns kings. And it wasn't until the fall that everything got twisted. So that has to tell me that those images that you see on the walls in Egypt were the original images of another time. How does that relate to now? You know, I think we should get to a place, y'all, where we look at ourselves and we actually get to the root of things. We look at ourselves and say, what are we so fearful of? Why are you so scared, friend? That little girl ain't gonna do nothing to you. That woman ain't gonna do nothing to you. What are you so afraid that she's going to be able to do to you that you can't recover from? That you have to suppress her. That you got to tiptoe. That you got to multiply her. You got to have a whole bunch of hers. Only to get later in your life to realize that all of them hers that you have didn't do anything but complicate your life. Why are you so afraid of her? Because that's what it tells me. Whenever I see people looking to suppress another, limit another, control another, that tells me that there's some inadequacy within you regarding that individual. There's a fear there. There's an insecurity there. That's not out of anything but those types of demons, those energies. And it all stems from the Adam and Eve story. All of it. A woman that is in alignment with herself and the God that is within her will do nothing but bless your life. You need to know yourself, and you need to know the God within you as a man to be able to distinguish her. Because just as there are many wolves dressed in men's clothing, there are many wolves dressed in women's clothing as well. And the only way to navigate the waters is to allow God to lead and direct your life. Period. This is my podcast episode for y'all today. Not long-winded. Just wanted to big up the queens. Big up to all the queens out there. I love y'all deep. I see you. I love you. Be good to yourselves and be good to each other. Peace and love.